So I know a lot of you guys have been pining for my next rant style video. I suppose one can find some kind of pleasure from listening to the disgruntled ramblings of a slop content creator, and going off the views alone, that seems to apply to a lot of people. The reason I've been holding off for so long is because it is emotionally draining. All the frustration that you've witnessed in that video was authentic. I plopped myself in front of a mic and started venting all my grievances with the state of ranked. But in that unhinged, emotionally charged rant session, I briefly talked about how the devs initially wanted to overhaul rank to feature item restrictions, but ultimately scrapped it because they were afraid of making good changes. Now, I'm not suggesting that the devs watched my video and felt called out. Okay, who am I kidding? I definitely had some influence there. That video got nearly 150k views, the YouTubers reacted to it. It was even reposted on Bilibili so it can reach the Chinese player base, and because of that, the devs went ahead and created League Play. Well, guess Christmas came early for all of us.
Tonight we dance around the flame, then we get to play the spirit game, spirit name.
You made those words up.
No, those are real words.
Now if you've been living under a rock, you might be wondering,
What the hell is that?
let me give you a quick rundown on what League Play actually is. Side note, I will not be covering anything related to strats for League Play. I don't need to teach you how to play the fucking game, just watch comp gameplay for that. Basically, League Play is a subset of ranked with a few item restrictions to make it closer to competitive play by taking the shit that is not good for the game out of the equation. Your score streaks have been narrowed down to the Hunter-Killer drone, Predator missile and EMP systems. So no more wall hacks, no more tower defense simulator, and no more final boss mode with the chopper gunner and gunship. Every single wildcard, fantastic. The game was never balanced around them to begin with. I mean, it should be no surprise that the ability to have double operator skills or an extra score streak would be a bad idea. Next, we have the lethals and tacticals. It is pretty much the same as comp with a few minor differences. So a lot of the equipment that encourages bitch behavior, such as trip mines, trip sensors, and heartbeat sensors got banned. They also banned a lot of the obnoxious equipment such as gas grenades, cryo bombs, contact grenades, and molotovs. So now, stepping into the objective no longer feels like fighting Lawrence from Bloodborne. When it comes to the operator skills, some of them got banned because they screw with the game in ways that shouldn't be messed with in the first place, such as controlling where your team spawns, increasing the health of you and your entire team, or flat out area denial. Not to mention capturing the objective for you. What the fuck is this, Timmy? Others got banned because they're near impossible to fight against. So no more reactor cores melting you from the top floor of the 2-story in Nuketown while you can't shoot them back, and no more ballistic shields sitting in one corner of the OBJ doing fuck all while being completely. I would also appreciate it if they banned the Sparrow, Equalizers, and Death Machine, mainly because allowing them contradicts with the reasons they banned some of the other operator skills. The reason they banned the Kinetic Armor and TAC 5 was because the extra health resulted in inconsistent encounters. So why the hell did they allow the operator skills that also increase the user's effective health via damage resistance while having the equivalent of a BFG in their hands is beyond me. But I can't be too mad. At least operator skills in general are way less obnoxious since the elements that buff them also got banned. Oh yeah, speaking of which, we have my favorite part, the perk bans. I did not talk about this in my rant video, but the perks have some of the most horrendous balancing I've ever seen in a COD title. Overclock and unit support got banned, so you can't just blitz through your operator charge anymore. You can't streak up faster for free with hardline being banned. Healing in general has become a lot harder as Quick Fix, Vulture, Fast Recover, along with Stims, got banned. So there is no getting around the healing delay, forcing you to play a lot more conservatively. And finally, for the pièce de résistance, they banned Martyrdom and Persistence. No more quick time events punishing you just for getting a kill, and no more negative KD twats getting free score streaks. we might actually be one step closer to heaven. Now unfortunately there are no weapon or attachment related bans, but we'll go more into that later. As for the game modes, we have the 3 comp modes: Hardpoint, Search and Destroy, and Control. I should need to explain what these game modes are, since I'm pretty sure most of you have played them. But unlike standard ranked, you cannot select the game mode as it is chosen at random along with the map. The gameplay settings for these modes are also different compared to standard ranked. The hardpoint score goes up to 200 instead of 150, and Search and Destroy is now 1st to 7 instead of 1st to 5. It is worth noting that these are still lower than the comp settings.
You were never one of us. You were nothing but a usurper.
Now we can talk about what I like about League play. The first thing I gotta appreciate is this mode putting the entire player base on fraud watch. I talked about how the shitters in ranked rely exclusively on these overpowered crutch mechanics to get by. So what happens? We take those away from them.
You don't understand. This is all I have. I'm nothing without this
cheese. If you're nothing without this cheese, then you shouldn't have it.
If you've played this mode right after it was released, you would have noticed the number of single-digit bot frags. These troglodytes have been so used to cheesing their way out of every single gunfight that when they actually have to take an honorable exchange of bullets, they fucking die. Most of the overpowered items in the game are pretty much gone, so they're forced to rely on their own skill, which is a resource that these people do not have in abundance. Which does mean that unfortunately, they tend to put me out after the first 3 or so games, leaving only the highly skilled players and scrim warriors, those who actually know how to play the game without relying on mechanics that play the game for them. And if you do land yourself in lobbies that only consist of these players, you might actually end up being the bot frag. By taking the most overtuned items out of the equation, the overall experience in game is drastically different. Standard ranked can be best described as a slapfest with operators and equipment. Most of your games are simply a matter of which team can spam the most bullshit at each other. There is hardly any skill involved here, just abuse button A and button B. 90% of your deaths do not involve actual weapons. It is either some operator spam or a random martyrdom nade. And in the rare event that the kill feed shows you dying to a gun, you can bet your ass that it was some death combo of bullshit and the gun was just a finishing blow. Now in League play, operators are way harder to spam without the wildcard and the unholy perk combination. You're not getting exterminatus every game since persistence and all the big score streaks are banned, and the brain dead equipment spam has been reduced to pretty much single digits. So now you actually have to bother with the thing that's been in your hands the whole time: your gun. This means that the game will actually reward you for being mechanically good at the game. Even if you lose, you won't be feeling nearly as frustrated as you aren't getting robbed by some bullshit mechanic. Obviously, the shitters will still try to find some kind of excuse as to why they lost, but the intelligent players out there would understand that they lost fair and square, for the most part. Previously, the only way to achieve this was scrims, but scrims require quite a bit of planning. You need to find at least 9 other players who would agree to the same rules, along with a suitable time for everyone to hop on. So it was not something that you could do willy-nilly. League play is a far more easily achievable solution, as you just have to queue to a match. But unfortunately you cannot queue with friends in this mode, which is a little annoying.
Dispenser going up.
But while League play is an excellent step in the right direction, it is still not the perfect solution. Yet. It is worth noting that this mode is still being tested before it can be implemented into the main ranked mode, so there's always room for improvements. There is a decently long list of issues with this mode which need to be resolved before we can even get there. The first problem I want to talk about is regarding the game modes. Now, there are several things to look at here. While the game mode settings have been adjusted to be closer to competitive, I don't see why we can't make it 1-to-1. The score limit for hardpoint should be 250, not 200. And Search and Destroy should be 1st to 9, not 1st to 7. Some might make the argument that the games will be too long, but the whole point of this game mode is to recreate the competitive environment, and as such, the game mode should accurately reflect this. The other issue is the fact that you can't select your game mode, meaning that you're at the absolute mercy of a dice roll. Now I say dice roll implying that the odds of getting each mode is fair, when it's more like playing Russian roulette with a mag-fed handgun instead of a revolver, because 90% of the time, you're getting search and destroy. Now I do not have a good explanation as to why this is the case. Maybe the devs think that not enough people are playing search and destroy, and want to boost the numbers.
Let's up those numbers!
Maybe it is easier for the matchmaker to queue for search and destroy. But either way, this is a problem that needs to be looked at. Do you have any idea how frustrating it is when I want to play hardpoint or control, but all I fucking get is search and destroy on summits? The easiest solution to this would be to allow players to select the game mode they want. There are two schools of thought that I can see here. We have the ones who agree with this solution, as the players get to stick to the game mode they're most comfortable with and reduce the risk of throwing because they're unfamiliar with the game mode. And then we have the ones who disagree with the idea and believe that players should be forced outside of their comfort zone and learn to play all three comp modes. Both sides are equally valid, so to satisfy everyone, I suggest allowing players to blacklist one of the three game modes. Players will have the ability to control what game modes they're getting, but they still have to learn more than one game mode. We can even increase the rank points earned if you didn't blacklist any of them, similar to how it is in standard ranked. This will encourage, not force, but encourage players to learn all three game modes. Since we're here, we might as well talk about the maps. While I don't have that many issues with the current map pool, I would also love to see some of the other comp maps get added, such as Hacienda, Slums, and Crossroads Strike. I've seen some players complain that we have maps that aren't featured in comp, but I think this is fine. It could be a pretty good way to experiment which maps work well in a competitive setting. Side note, I think it would be pretty cool if we have a map ban system. This would be like the inverse of the map vote in standard ranked. After the game mode is selected, players will get to vote for a map to be blacklisted, so it will not get selected from the map pool. This will allow players to have some degree of control as to what maps they get, especially if there's a map that no one likes.
That's the neat thing. You don't.
Now we move on to the most common complaint that I've been seeing ever since this mode was announced: the lack of weapon and attachment bans. As much as I want this to be a thing, this is one of the issues that the devs will never fix if it were to be implemented into the main ranked mode. There are two reasons for this. The first one is monetary. Timmy Studios and Activision are, at the end of the day, companies, and all companies need to make money. The cosmetics that make them the most money are weapon skins, mainly mythics and legendaries. If a weapon gets banned, any sales that could be made from that gun basically plummet down to zero. No one is going to buy a skin of a banned weapon. After all, what is the point in spending upwards of $500 on a mythic if you can't even use it? Even attachment bans will have the same effect, albeit to a lesser extent, as it is still limiting the functionality of the weapon. Some of you might say,
just play standard rank then.
But if this mode is to be implemented into standard rank in the future, then there is no getting around it. Not to mention that this completely ignores the whales who would prefer league play over standard ranked. Weapon bans will also negatively affect sales in the long term. If league play becomes a mainstay, and weapon bans do get implemented, this sets a precedent. Any weapon can get banned at any point if it's strong enough. Some players will simply opt to cut their losses and stop buying weapon skins entirely. As for all they know, the gun they just spent a week's worth of food on could get banned in the future. The second reason is much more minor, but is still a reason nonetheless: weapon mastery. This is mainly for weapon bans and less so for attachment bans. If a weapon gets banned from ranked, it becomes impossible to grind mastery for it, and this will piss off pretty much every single leaderboard player. This is a problem for the devs, as these guys generally contribute a lot of screen time, as they play a shit ton just to keep their name on the chart. And do not say they can play Battle Royale. No one wants to slog 8 hours a day solo queuing that mode.
I have been falling For 30 minutes!
And then we have the last major issue with League Play, the matchmaker. Getting into a game seems to take way longer than standard ranked. It is not uncommon to wait over 5 minutes for a game, just for it to tell you that it can't find a match. This is the result of a multitude of factors, the main reason being that League Play is a separate game mode from standard ranked. Right off the bat, this splits the queue in half, greatly reducing the number of players that can be put into a match. And then you add the fact that a lot of players, shitters, would opt to avoid this mode entirely since the items they rely on as a crutch are banned. When you consider that the devs have been catering to these guys for over a year now, you can imagine just how massive the population of shitters is. Shitters, because I'm going to be completely honest with you, the only players who pick League Play are those who watch champs and or understand good game design, which is a very small percentage of the player base. So yeah, no surprise that it takes several business days to get into a match. You could try to add more incentive for players to partake in League Play by adding exclusive rewards, but this is a very temporary solution, as it leads to an Undead Siege/DMZ situation where most players only play it for the rewards and then forget about the mode entirely once they get said rewards. I think the appeal of playing in a much more competitive environment should be enough of an incentive. Skill-based matchmaking also seems to be set to a minimum, if there even is a skill-based matchmaking. Sometimes you get into a dumpster lobby and slam the entire enemy team. Other times you have to play against the best players in the entire region, while your team barely knows how to shoot a gun. I believe that this is due to the low number of players in this mode. The matchmaker still tries to match all players fairly, but because there are not enough players for that, it just gives up and shoves whoever's in the queue into a game. And unfortunately, there is no real way to fix this in the mode's current state. And that leads us to the final section. Where do we go from here? The most obvious direction will be to implement the same restrictions into standard ranked. Yes, I'm suggesting making League Play the default.
But sleep? Wouldn't that mean that the bad players who rely on the banned items will have a harder time?
Yes, that's the point. In the current state of ranked, legendary literally doesn't mean shit anymore. Anyone who plays the game to any capacity can and will hit legendary. When you go out there and say, "Hi guys, I hit legendary," you are bragging over a participation reward. If we made legendary even slightly harder to achieve, wouldn't that inherently make it mean more? And besides, even with the item restrictions and adjusted game mode settings, ranked wouldn't even be that hard. All the player has to do is slam the start button enough times until they hit 8k. Again! All we're doing here is making ranked more than just pubs with less bots. If you want to abuse the broken stuff, go play Hardpoint Shipment, but ranked is going to be where all the serious players are at. But obviously, the sudden introduction of item restrictions can be a bit daunting for the lower skill players who need a little bit of help. So instead of giving the full list of restrictions right off the bat, I suggest gradually introducing the restrictions bit by bit as you go up in rank. That way, the player gets to adjust the rule set, but by the time the player hits Grandmaster, they should have the full list of restrictions. And those are my thoughts on League Play. Even in this early, unpolished stage, I have found it to be a far better experience than standard rank, as I actually feel rewarded for being good at the game, and I'm glad that the devs are taking the initiative to address a very real problem in the current state of ranked. I would love to see this being the default for ranked, and even if it doesn't work out, I wholeheartedly pray that they do not remove it and keep it as an option for players like me. But that's just my experience from playing the game mode, so how do you guys feel about League Play? Would you like to see this being fully implemented into ranked? Feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you found the video helpful, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. But until then, I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye bye.